Greetings, citizens. Hey you beautiful creepy human being you. Welcome to my channel and welcome to today's true crime video. I'm so happy we were able to meet like this. I'm so happy that somehow in all of the craziness that we're forced to deal with on the day-to-day, today you and I were able to find each other on this crazy little planet that we call home. My name is Brittany or Bratterstein, whichever you prefer, and today we're going to be discussing the absolutely horrible torture murders of Channon Christian and Chris Newsom. But before we get started, if you have not yet had the pleasure, please make sure to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing that bell. I put out a new video every single week and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you, specifically you, but I can only do that if you join the Brat Pack and become one of us. And now that you've gone ahead and presumably joined the cult, we can go ahead and get into this video. Now this video is on a case that I have had requested to do, like people have requested me to do this more times. This sentence isn't good. I'm gonna say that. This is starting out well. More people have asked me to cover this more times than any other case ever. I went back and I counted and there was over 20 people who asked me to cover this case, but nobody was more vocal about this case being told by me than a longtime subscriber named Chelsea. So hi Chelsea. Thank you Chelsea for the nightmares. I saw every single one of your comments and I was like, I'm gonna do it eventually. And eventually the day has come. The time is nigh. And of course, I also want to thank everybody else who suggested this case. There was just so many of you. This is one that I've been planning to do a while, and I can see why you guys wanted it covered because it is absolutely insane. It's so horrible. And the reason I've put it off so long, because the comments have been coming in for a while, is because there was a couple of reasons. One, I knew the time it would take to look into this and do it properly. I needed to have like a chunk of uninterrupted time, and you know, as a new mom, that's a little bit challenging. And two, it's just so horrible that I knew mentally it was going to be a lot, and it has been a lot because this case, man, is so just, it's disgusting. It's so messed up. It was so bad. Okay, for a little toe dip for you guys before we get into it, people fainted in court because they heard the details of this case. So it was a lot to look into. But, you know, I did look into it. Now I've read all the things so that you do not have to. And now I'm going to tell you all about it today. And at the end of this video, I want you to answer the question of the day. So I'm going to give it to you now so you can have it kicking around in your brain whilst I tell you the story so that at the end you can answer it. And the question is this: what do you think was the real motive for the murders of Channon and Christian? Like, what went so wrong here? Let me know in the comments below. And now with all of that said, come gather around and let me tell you the story of the horrible torture murders of Channon Christian and her boyfriend, Chris Newsom. All right, now where does one even begin with a case this messed up? That's really the question. I think the best thing we can do is let's jump in our handy dandy time machine and let's head to January of 2007 in Knoxville, Tennessee. It's a cold day in January because it's January. And there's a man, his name's J.D. Ford, and he's just out there doing his job. He was a train conductor, so he was just out there conducting trains and shit. When he's going, you know, the train's going down the tracks, and he notices something off the side of the tracks that looks a bit odd to him. He thinks that he saw a body. So he calls into his chief and he's like, listen, this is what I think I saw. What should I do here? And his boss is like, okay, you know, stop the train, go ahead, call the cops, stay there, wait for them to get there, we'll get it all sorted out, everything will be fine. So he's like, cool. He does that, he calls authorities. But after that, he's like, you know what, I want to go make sure that what I think I'm seeing is what I actually saw, because he wasn't sure what he saw. So he gets out of the train and he has to walk back a bit because, you know, trains take a while to stop, so he had passed it by quite a bit. He walks back, he gets a little closer, and he realizes that yes, what he had seen was a body. This person he had found was in really bad shape. He was partially nude, and though his legs, like his lower legs below the knee, were in okay shape, as in they weren't horribly burned, the rest of the body was. So this is what he was stumbling into. He's just trying to do his job, and he's finding this body that's burnt from the knees up. It's really, I can't even imagine what the sight is like. So the cops show up and they're like processing the scene and they're looking at it. And the person had like a blindfold around their eyes. And because of this, they were sort of preserved. The fire hadn't destroyed them the way it had the rest of the body. They were somewhat preserved. And this actually ended up being very helpful in identifying who this person was, because one of the officers on the scene looked at the eyes and was like, oh shit, I think I know who this is. This officer was a friend to the family of a young man who was missing, a young man who everybody had been looking for This body was that of 23-year-old Chris Newsom. Now, this is already horrible, right? Like, beyond comprehension horrible to have this young person who everybody has been searching for and hoping that they're okay, and every minute that passes by, it gets more and more hopeless feeling, and then this is the conclusion it comes to. That's already so messed up. There's so many questions now. Like, he's literally by the train tracks, a thing around his head burnt. Like, there's so many things that they want to know the answers to. But there was one particular question that was the loudest amongst all the others. Obviously, what happened to Chris was a huge question that had to be answered. But another question was, where is Channon? Because though Chris had been searched for and everybody was wondering where he wasn't the only person who was missing. Chris had gone missing with his 21-year-old girlfriend, Channon Christian, and now no one knew where she was, and it wasn't looking good considering how Chris had been found. So now, before we get into the whole story of what happened to these two, let's first talk about who was Chris Newsom and who was Channon Christian. Hugh Christopher Newsom Jr., who went by Chris, was one of 5 children. He had 3 sisters and 1 brother, and they were all born, or at least he was born, I didn't check the paternity of the other children, doesn't matter, to Mary and Hugh is who Chris was named after. Chris was actually like a little bit of a miracle baby for them because they were a bit older when they had him, and they had kind of considered their child raising years to be done because all of their other children were adults by this point. They were already grown, and then boom, here's a bouncing baby boy named Chris, full of like little boy energy. And they said he was just like a sweet, energetic boy, but also a total sweetheart. And that this like sweetness translated into adult Chris, because he was said to have just been like a special person who loved beautiful things and had a giant heart. And like on the last Christmas before he was killed, which was less than a month before he was killed, all that he wanted, all that was on his Christmas list was world peace, which is a tall order. I don't know if Santa Claus could deliver on that, but it just goes to show the type of person that he was. So Chris's parents knew he was a good person, obviously. They knew who he was, they knew who they had raised, but after he died, they learned just how good of a person he was, because people like flocked to these parents to tell them stories about what an awesome guy Chris was. They said he was the type of guy who would sit with like the unpopular kid in the lunchroom so that they wouldn't feel excluded and that they'd feel accepted. He was the type of guy who would take the girl that didn't have a date to the dance, and he was the type of guy who would try to like comfort a scared pit bull who was at a job site he was working. Chris was a talented athlete, picking up a baseball bat at the age of 4, and he was a notable player all through high school. His room was full of medals and trophies and ribbons, but he ended up getting an injury that made it so baseball couldn't be his career. So after he graduated in 2002, he briefly worked for like as a motorcycle mechanic, but eventually he ended up moving on to another talent he had, which was working with wood. And he was said to not want to just be a carpenter, but a craftsman, and he took pride in his work. He even made his own headboard for his bed. And this is a bed in a room that, though full of things, still feels incredibly empty because Chris is gone. And it's so sad, man. I don't know if it's still this way, but in an article I read, which was like the latest one I could find on this particular bit of information, which was in 2017, neither of these kids' parents were able to change their rooms. Like, they couldn't bring themselves to change anything. Everything was preserved exactly how it had been when they had left. Like, literally their backpacks hadn't been unpacked and their clothes hadn't been put away because their parents just could not bring themselves to do it. So that's how Chris's room is. It's just completely untouched. It looks exactly how it did the night that he left to go on a date with his new girlfriend, Channon Christian. Now, Channon and Chris had started dating in November of 2006. So they had only been dating like 2 or 3 months when this happened. They were pretty new. That's a pretty new relationship. But their friends and their family said that they thought the world of each other. Channon Gale Christian was one of 2 children, the only daughter born to parents Gary and Dina. Her and her brother Chase, like Chris to his family, were also considered miracles to her family, to their family. Channon and her brother Chase were miracles to their parents because their mother, Dina, was actually told that she couldn't have kids, and despite that, she went on to have 2 children. First Chase, followed by Channon, who she called her little chunky monkey baby. Channon grew up in an upper middle class home on the edge of West Knoxville, which I guess West Knoxville was like where you wanted to be. It was the nice area where the people with the money lived. It was said in this documentary that I watched that there was West Knoxville and then there was the rest of Knoxville. And a lot of people in West Knoxville were said to like know that and maybe feel a bit superior. Not all of them for sure, but the vibe was there, and that's where Channon was from. But she was said to not be like that. She was said to have been a really nice girl, an accepting girl of any and everyone, the type of girl to have never met a stranger. Channon was one of those people who was said to light up a room with her gentle heart, her fun-loving spirit, and her toothy smile. She was said to be beautiful inside and out. Her father said that she had a beautiful face and also a beautiful heart. Channon was close with her family. She was really close with her brother Chase. She even followed him through 5 states when he was playing ball, and she was both a daddy's girl and her mom's best friend. Her mom said that her and her daughter, there was very few things that she did not know about Channon, that the two would sit and talk for hours about their lives and Shannon's plans for her future. Channon was one of those people who had a very clear idea of what she wanted her future to be like. She was going to the University of Tennessee, and I think she had 1 year left, and she was majoring in sociology, and she loved children, so she wanted to take her education and work with kids. And not only did she want to work with kids, but she loved kids so much that she wanted to have her own kids, obviously. Not obviously. Well, I mean, you love kids, you love kids. So she loved kids so much, she wanted to have her own kids, and she wanted to have 4 to be exact. She had her number down, and she wanted the first one to be a boy because she wanted her other kids to have a big brother who was as awesome as her own brother, Chase. And, oh my God, it's so heartbreaking for her mother, because her mother's just like, I don't get to see that happen. I don't get to watch her have kids. I don't get to be a grandmother to her kids. She does have grandkids. Chase has gone on to have kids, but she doesn't get to be a grandmother to Shannon's kids, and she doesn't get to like help her plan a wedding. She was like, every mother wants to help her daughter pick out a wedding dress, and she doesn't get to do that. Channon was just a normal, good 21-year-old girl. She loved clothes and shoes and dogs and went to church and went to class and worked 2 jobs, and she was just like a good friend. The type of friend that her friends would call with if they had issues, because she was the type of person that would listen. She was just a good person from a good family who everyone liked, who didn't bother anybody. Now, as I said, the two had just started dating. I guess what was actually supposed to happen is that Chris was supposed to get set up with one of Shannon's friends. Yeah, I said that right. But once he was like in the scenario, it was probably at like a house party. I'm speculating there. Basically, once he saw Channon, he was like, friend who, this is who I want. This is the only person I want. And Channon was super into him too. Though the two had only been dating a few months, things were progressing nicely, and Chris had even recently brought Channon to meet his family, so things were clearly like moving in a good direction. And it's sad to just wonder like what could have been, you know? The two were just by all accounts good people, the kind of kids that every parent hoped for, compassionate, hardworking, smart people. And it's just sad. It's incredibly sad that this is what happened to them. It's incredibly sad that this could happen to anybody. This is a fucked up case, dude. So now that I've told you who these people were, we're going to get into what happened to them. And what happened to them is absolutely horrible. What happened to them is so bad that I wouldn't even tell my husband the details of this case, because I've been working on this one. This one took a very long time for me. I've been working on it for 3 weeks, and my husband knows that I've been like consistently working on this one case. And I even told him, I was like, I won't tell you what happened in this case, because he's not about true crime at all. So something this horrible, like, it wouldn't be palatable for him. So that's just kind of a warning. This kind of case scares me. This is the kind of thing, because it seems like there's not many things that could have been done to avoid it. You know, there's not much to learn from it, except for that people can be monsters. And I think that that is sometimes hard to swallow. And so it's been hard, like mentally, it's been taxing. Not gonna lie, this one was a bit tough to cover. My husband, I told him about it, and he's like, you should watch Step Brothers, because my brain has become a jelly. He's like, you should watch Step Brothers, because fun fact, I don't know if you saw this article, but Evan Peters said to get out of the Jeffrey Dahmer headspace, he watched Step Brothers. But that's neither here nor there. This is just my warning to you that this case is messed up. On a cold night in January of 2007, Channon was at a friend of hers house, and they were getting ready to go to a party. It was just going to be like a normal house party. We've probably all been to one. Basically what the plan was is that Chris was going to meet Channon and her friend at Shannon's friend's house. They were all going to go together, and they were going to go to this house party. But Channon and Chris decided that before going to the party, they wanted to hang out alone and get some food, you know, normal stuff. So Channon and her friend said, like, goodbye, you know? Her friend was like, okay, cool. If you're gonna like go eat with him, I'm just gonna go to the party now. It's only 10 minutes away. So I'm gonna leave you here at my house and I'm gonna go. So she did just that. She left Channon at her apartment to wait for Chris to get there. At some point after her friend left, Channon went down to the parking lot to wait with her car, which was a large SUV. So she's there, she waits for Chris, he gets there, the two, meet each other, and they're at her car just kind of, not loitering, what's the word? Just taking their fucking time because they're allowed to, right? They're sitting there, they're giving each other some kisses, they're excited to see each other, they're still, it's been 2 to 3 months. That's just how it goes, right? This makes me so mad. So they're doing that, and I don't even think Chris had gotten into her vehicle yet. Like, this all happened so fast. They're standing there, and they're approached by a group of armed men who are there to carjack them. They take them, they shove them inside of Shannon's vehicle, and they bind them with whatever they're able to find in her SUV, and then they stack them in the back seat on top of each other before taking off, with one of the men driving her SUV and another car driven by another man following behind them. These men said they have always claimed that this was meant to be a carjacking, that they needed money, that they needed a car, but that as they approached Channon and Chris with their guns drawn, headlights from another car spooked them, so they needed to get out of there quickly, so they shoved them inside the vehicle. But how they could go from the mindset of a carjacking to what they end up doing is unthinkable and a little unbelievable. The DA said of this murder, and I quote, "It was a wicked crime. It was one of the most horrific crimes we have ever endured. You just can't believe it happened. What would be going through someone's mind that would cause them to do this to anyone? If the goal was to steal the vehicle, then take the vehicle. It certainly spoke to the guilt of the defendants." Channon and Chris were then driven to a house that was located on Chipman Street. The house was said to be located in a, quote, "seedy back alley neighborhood at the epicenter of Knoxville's drug trade," end quote. And it was an area that the locals just knew that you simply did not go to at night. Once they got to this home, Channon and Chris were marched inside the home where I believe it was two people were inside the home, just like doing what one does when you're just chilling inside of a house, when all of a sudden this scene walks in the door. Now, the players here, the people who are responsible for what would go on to happen to Channon and Chris, are as follows. 25-year-old LaMarcus Slim Davidson, 24-year-old Latalvis Rome Cobbins, 24-year-old George Detroit Thomas, 34-year-old Eric E. Boyd, and 18-year-old Vanessa Coleman. I guess she did not inherit a nickname like the men did. So now, it is unclear in this case exactly who did exactly what, right? With this many defendants, plus the fact that once they were arrested, they all started to turn on each other, blame one another for what they did, as criminals do. They don't want to take accountability for what they've done. But because of that, it is a little hard to tell who did what, right? Like, that makes sense. But from DNA evidence and overlapping statements, things that multiple people said were true, because obviously good liars are going to tell a little bit of truth, a little bit of false, they were able to put together what happened here. And one thing that seemed to be apparent across the board is that LaMarcus was the ringleader, and the home on Chipman Street where the two were brought was his rental. Eric Boyd was LaMarcus's friend, Latalvis was LaMarcus's brother, and Latalvis was in town with his girlfriend, Vanessa, and their friend, George. Those three, Latalvis, Vanessa, and George, all came in from Kentucky for the holidays, and they had been there like less than 2 weeks when this happened, mind you. Keep that in mind, that they just got there when all of this went down. None of the three had jobs. George and Latalvis were actually said to be homeless at this time. Like, I don't know, they had been like couch surfing, and now they were at his brother's house. And Vanessa had a family who could help her. Her family was said to be salt of the earth people. I don't know what that means exactly. I don't really know what that term signifies in this case. But basically it said that she had a family that could help her if she needed help, but she just didn't take help from them. So Channon and Chris are brought into this house, and they're about to experience some of the worst things that any person could ever experience, things that no person should ever have to go through. And again, because of the conflicting stories and so many people with so many versions, exactly what happened in what order is a little hard to determine. So I think the best way to go about this, so it makes sense, is talk about what happened to each of them separately, and then talk about the aftermath and things like that. So let's start with Chris. Chris Newsom was the first to be killed, but before he was killed, he was brutally beaten, as I'm sure you can imagine, and he was raped by at least one person and an object. The ME ended up saying that the rapes happened hours before he was killed. They also said that what was done to him was too complex to have been done by one person, and that Chris had no defensive wounds, so he wasn't even able to fight off what happened to him. He was overpowered, basically, is what they were saying, by the number of people who were assaulting him. He was then bound with a dog leash. A bandana was wrapped around his eyes. A sock was stuffed into his mouth. And then like a sweatshirt, a hoodie was put around his head and then cinched in the back of his head. His ankles were also bound together, which made it difficult for him to walk, I'm sure, but they still forced him to regardless. They then forced him, they drug him from the house to the railroad tracks barefoot and partially nude. Once they got to the tracks, Chris was shot 3 times. Once in the back, which damaged his spinal cord, causing him to fall to the ground. A second shot to the neck, and neither of these shots killed him, by the way. It was the 3rd shot that killed him. His killer put the gun against his head and shot him a 3rd time, killing him. These monsters inflicted as much pain as possible on him before killing him, dousing his body in an accelerant, and setting him on fire. Fortunately, I guess you could say, it's not a good word, but I can't think of another. There was no soot in his lungs, so that means he was not alive when he was set on fire. So that's something, I guess. But they literally set him on fire, dude. And because of this fire, the DNA that could prove who had raped him was unusable. Like, they were able to recover DNA. They knew that somebody had done it, but it wasn't usable in identifying a suspect, which is just horrible. But after they did this, they went home, they stripped off their bloody gas-covered clothes, and just went on to do what they did next. Now, keep in mind, while this is happening, Channon and Chris are expected somewhere. Their friends are waiting for them to show up at this party. So at about 10 p.m., their absence was noticed. Their friends started calling them, started texting them, started blowing up their phones, because like, bro, you're supposed to be here, like, we're all waiting for you so that we can have some fun. But they get no response. So they wait till about 11, and this is when their friends are like, okay, and they head to the apartment, because remember, it's just like down the road. They head to the apartment to see what's going on, see if they're still there. And when they get there, they see that Chris's truck is still there, or his truck? I think it was truck. Was still there, but Shannon's vehicle was gone. And this was a little weird because usually Chris would take his car, but they were like, okay, they didn't think too much of it until the next day. So Channon and Chris obviously didn't go home that night, right? And they both lived at home with their parents, and they didn't really freak out because they were both adults. They often went out and hung out with their friends, would stay overnight. It was a little weird for Channon because she had called her parents that night and told them that she was going to be coming home, and then didn't, so they thought it was possible that she just changed her mind. And one thing about this call that got to me is that it's a little unclear where it fits into this timeline, but it seems that Channon might have been with her captors when she made this call. I don't know if that's true. I couldn't find it clarified, but based on the timeline I read, it seems like that could be the case, and that is terrifying to imagine. Just to picture that scenario is like a lot for my brain. But anyways, moving on. They don't come home. It's not a big deal. No one's really freaking out. That was until Shannon's parents receive a call. They get a call informing them that Channon was scheduled to work that day and had not shown up. And Channon never, ever missed work. Like, remember, she was very reliable. She had 2 jobs. She never missed work. So this is when panic set in. So her mom calls Shannon's friend, who she had been with the night before, and she's like, what's going on? And she's like, I don't know. Chris's truck's in my parking lot still, but they're not here. They're nowhere to be found. Shannon's car's gone. I don't know what's going on. So that's when Shannon's mom then calls Chris's parents, because she's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, she's worried. And she talks to Chris's mom. She tells her what's going on. And she's like, listen, I'm scared, right? And this is when Chris's mom's like, well, shit, like, now I'm scared too. So they call them, no answer. Their friends call them, no answer. The 2 sets of parents try to report their kids missing, but the cops don't take it seriously, as we see from time to time in these cases. They're like, listen, they're newly dating. They're in their 20s. They have a car. They have money. They're probably just shacked up somewhere. And even so, they're adults. They're allowed to disappear if they want to. But their parents are like, listen, you're fucking wrong. Like, we know our kids. This is not our kids. They wouldn't run away. They wouldn't just disappear. This doesn't make any sense. So they took it upon themselves, since they weren't going to get help from the cops, that they were going to investigate themselves. They were going to see what happened to their kids. Chris's parents were in charge of phones. They were in charge of calling friends, waiting for calls to come in, calling hospitals, things like that. And Shannon's parents and like their friends decided they were going to do like a full-blown search. They even went as far as finding out what cell tower the last call that they had been made from. And when they saw this, they were like, okay, this does not look good, because the cell tower that the phone had pinged off of, Cell Science, was near Cherry Street, and this was right by Chipman, and this was an area that, again, you do not go to, and that neither kid had any reason to ever go to, ever. Like, this just wasn't a place that they frequented. So, her family, her friends, they get together, they go to that area, that bad area at night. They meet just after sundown at a gas station in the area, and while they're all there, it's like a giant group of people that don't normally hang out in that area, they actually do run into a cop, and this was a cop that knew Chris's dad, right? And he helped them actually coordinate the search so that they weren't just like fumbling all over themselves, since they didn't know how to do a search because they're not cops. 4 hours, friends and family searched that neighborhood, just going block by block, street by street. And with each passing minute, they're getting more and more panicked because there is really no reason for Channon and Chris to be there. And they search and they search, and then they finally find something. They actually find Shannon's car. They find this car not far from where Chris's body had been discovered, because I think by this point, Chris had been found, but he had not yet been identified as being Chris. The timeline was a little fuzzy on that, but I'm 95% sure that is the case. But either way, they find the car. It's not far from where Chris was, so it's all connected. They just don't know that yet. And it's clear that the car had recently not been in Shannon's possession. The floor of the car was covered in mud. The car's window stickers had been removed, the doors had been wiped down, and most of Shannon's items had been removed from the inside. Like her CDs were gone, the photos on the visor were gone, Channon was gone. But it was clearly her vehicle, because her sweater was still found in the back seat. The front seat was pushed all the way back so far that her parents said she wouldn't have even been able to see over the dashboard, right? So like clearly somebody else had been driving this car. So the police do impound the vehicle, and they just classified it as an abandoned vehicle, but they were going to take it, they were going to process it, do fingerprints, all that jazz. And they told her parents, like, listen, go home, relax, get some rest, wait for a call, as if that would be possible for anyone in the situation. The next day, Chris had been identified, and an officer had to go over and tell his parents. I can't imagine giving that information. And as soon as they learned it, they just fell apart. His mom even collapsed to the floor. And I think this was before even learning what exactly had happened to him, but they did learn what had happened to him. And his father just said that it was complete horror, that it was the type of thing that he wouldn't wish on his worst enemy. This poor family couldn't even see their son. Like, they had to have a closed casket because of he was just in such rough shape. They literally had to hug his form through a body bag, which just, the image of that destroys me. And I guess when his mom hugged him, she was like, listen, this isn't goodbye for me, because I know I'm going to see you again one day. And his father said of this experience, and I quote, "We were regulated to embracing a body bag as our farewell to our son. It's demoralizing, it's hurtful, it leaves something in your mind you can never get rid of." After Chris was found, obviously Shannon's family found out about this, and they went right back out. Her father, her friends, they all went back out and searched for her again. It didn't look good, considering how they had found Chris, but you never know. You had to try. They searched abandoned buildings and vacant homes, just calling and calling her name, and the sheriff also sent out helicopters over the area where her cell phone had last pinged. And meanwhile, police are processing her vehicle. And it's clear that whoever had abandoned it had wiped it down as well. They barely found any prints, not even Shannon's herself, but then they did find one print that was found on an envelope in the back seat of the car. They find one fingerprint, and they're like, fuck yeah, finally, something that we can go on. They run the print, and it comes back as being associated with a known career criminal named LaMarcus Davidson. So LaMarcus had just gotten out of jail at this point, so the police that are investigating this situation contact his parole officer, and they find out from the parole officer that he is renting a home. They look up the address, and they see that it's literally like a few blocks from where Chris was found, so the puzzle pieces are starting to fit together. So police get a search warrant, and 3 days after the two went missing, Channon and Chris went missing, police surround the house at Chipman Street. They go in and they find that nobody is there. They can tell that somebody had just been there. Like, I think the TV was still on and there was food in the kitchen from when somebody had eaten, so it seemed like whoever had been there had just recently bailed. They move through the house, and this is when they come to the kitchen. And in the corner of the kitchen, they see a trash can. It was described as an oddly shaped 32-gallon trash can. So based on the way the trash can bulged on the sides, the officer who was discovering it thought that somebody might be hiding inside of it. So they pulled their gun, they approached the trash can, and they lifted the lid and were shocked to see a human arm that was covered with some fabric. And they knew immediately that they had found a dead body, but they weren't sure who this person was. Now, of course, Shannon's family is fearful. I mean, it was a fingerprint in her stolen car when she's missing that led them to the house, and her boyfriend had been found horribly murdered, but they don't know for sure that it's her. And honestly, the not knowing and having to wait, knowing a body had been found under all of those circumstances and just having to wait, sounds like a living nightmare. And this was a nightmare that would soon be realized, because they would find out that yes, it was her. So a cop had to go over and had to tell her family, not only that she was found dead, but where she was found, you know, stuffed inside of a trash can. And her father said that a large part of him died in that moment. Her mother just broke, you know, she couldn't take it. And her best friend said that when she found out, she just screamed and fell to the ground and was like, no. Like, what else can you possibly do in that situation? You know what I mean? And this is all before they even learned what had happened to her before she was put in that trash can. All the things that these people did to her, the types of things that no person should ever have to hear about and that no person should ever have to go through. Once removed from the trash can, it was found that Channon had been tied with ligatures to bind her into the fetal position. Essentially, she was hogtied. She was hogtied, and she was tied so tightly that her knees were touching her cheeks. And then she was stuffed into this trash can after being wrapped in 5 garbage bags around her body, and 1 small white bag was tied tightly around her head. She was put in this trash can, and I saw footage of this trash can. It does not look large enough to hold a person, let alone a person Shannon's size, because she was 5'8". She wasn't a small girl, and she would have to have been like crammed into this trash can. You know what I mean? Like the officer even said it was bulging at the sides, which is just like, Prior to being put in that trash can, Channon went through hours of torture. First, there was the fact that she knew her boyfriend had likely been killed, right? She was abducted with him together. They get there. These men leave with him, come back without him, right? Covered in blood, with a gas can smelling like gas. She had to know what had happened to him. So that's mental torture, right? But then there was also the physical torture. Channon was beaten and gang raped in every way a person can be raped. DNA showed that it was not only done by several people, but also objects. She had bruising and abrasions all over her body. She had been tied to a chair, and her gums were torn away from her teeth from something being shoved into her mouth with great force. She suffered several blows to the head, and her downstairs area was beaten bloody. More than just rape would have caused. She had likely been punched and kicked. After they did everything they were going to do to her over this several hour period of time, okay, this was hours of torture. It wasn't a quick thing for her. They then went and got bleach and poured it on her body in an attempt to, get rid of DNA. So they poured and scrubbed her bloody affected areas in hopes to get rid of DNA. And then they took this bleach and they poured it down her throat. They then hogtied her with pieces of bedding and fabric, putting her into the fetal position, and then wrapped her in trash bags, putting the white trash bag around her face, and stuffed her into the trash can alive. She was alive through everything I just described to you. She was alive for. She was alive and conscious for all of that before being stuffed in the trash can to die slowly by suffocation. The ME said that she died with her eyes open. Chris's mother said of what happened to her son and to Channon, and I quote, "For him to be tortured, for both of them to be tortured the way they were, it just breaks my heart. It just really tears me apart and breaks my heart. It's with us every single day. We can't forget it." The prosecutor later said you'd think nothing would shock him, but this did. Finding Chris shot and burnt, knowing his girlfriend was missing, hoping she'd be alive, and then finding her in that trash can, it was too much. He said it just doesn't get much darker than that. And the sheriff said that he had worked on over 100 murders and that these were the last 2 he worked, and they were by far the worst. Once the details of the injuries and the torture, like how the 2 had been found, started to be released and people started to learn about it, everyone in that community was shocked. Even like veteran officers, people who had seen a lot of shit, were like, this was just too much for us. This was too much for everyone. This was too much for this community. The following day, police returned to the home on Chipman Street so that they could search it more thoroughly. And when they did, they found a bunch of items that belonged to Channon and to Chris. They found photos from her 21st birthday party. They found clothing that she had last been seen wearing. They also found clothing. She had like boxes of clothes that she was going to be taking to Goodwill. And they had taken those out of her car, and they were found inside the house as well. They also found Shannon's iPod that had been a gift from her parents that said, "Channon Christian, Mom and Dad, we love you." And they found 2 of Chris's baseball hats, one of which he had been wearing when he was last seen alive. To add insult to injury, those photos that had been taken from Shannon's car, like off her visor photos that were important to her, were found burned and ripped inside the house. Like, why did they have to do that? I don't understand. And they also stuffed them in the trash, just like she would later be found. Apparently everything was just trash to these people. And they also found Chris's burnt driver's license. So now, police's #1 priority is finding LaMarcus, because he clearly is somebody they need to talk to. I mean, her body's found in his kitchen. His fingerprint is found in her vehicle. His house is right by where Chris's body was found. Like, he's clearly involved in some capacity. Police then find out that, yes, the house was rented to LaMarcus, but it wasn't only rented to LaMarcus. It was rented to LaMarcus and a woman named Daphne. So Daphne is brought in for questioning, and they find out from her that Daphne had lived there in the home. She had rented the home with him. She had been his girlfriend. They had rented the home together and lived there together with her kids, which is just horrifying. But she said she didn't live there, that she had just recently moved out after LaMarcus had beat the crap out of her. Daphne was quickly ruled out as not being involved because she had an alibi. She was with another man, and she was proven not to live there anymore. So they were like, okay, you're obviously not involved, but what do you know? What can you tell us? And she's like, I can tell you some very interesting information, actually. Thank you. She told police that, for one, LaMarcus was still in town. And this was good to know because he could have easily fled. Like, he could be on the run anywhere. So she was like, he was still in town. I've actually seen him in the last couple of days. So that was something interesting to note. And she was able to tell police that LaMarcus wasn't alone in the home, like, over this weekend that this was all going down, because she knew that he wasn't. She had seen him. And she said that he had had house guests, and that these house guests were people that he was kind of committing some types of crimes with. This was his brother, Latalvis, and his brother's girlfriend, Vanessa, and their friend, George. So now they know that there's all these people that could be involved, and all these different people that they need to look into. She said that these people arrived like right after she moved out, but she knew that they were there because she had actually, one, seen LaMarcus since all of this happened, so he could have told her, but two, and more importantly, she had actually been in the house since when Channon and Chris went missing. So she was in the house while at least Channon was in there. Daphne said she had gone to the house because she needed to pick up some of her stuff. Like, I think it was like a makeup bag and some other stuff. So she goes in and she sees Latalvis and George just hanging out in the living room, being a little anxious, she said, and that they were rolling a blunt. And she said that neither of them spoke to her, and she found that to be really strange. But she's like, what the fuck ever, you're rude, sure. But she said she could tell that something was up, that the vibes were off. You know what I mean? As I'm sure you can imagine that the energy would be weird as fuck in that house at that time. So she goes in and she's like, okay, I need to get my stuff. It's in the bathroom. So she heads to the bathroom. When she gets there, the door is locked. She says that she can tell somebody's in there. She hears running water and she heard an item fall in the sink, but she couldn't get in through that door. Nobody would let her in. So she knew there was another way into the bathroom, the way the house was set up. I think it was probably an indoor outhouse. In one door, you're in a room, out, you're in another room. It doesn't matter. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. I'm talking too fast. Stop. Slow down. She heads to the other door to go to the bathroom, which would lead her through the kitchen. And as soon as she starts to do that, she's stopped by LaMarcus, and he's like, nah, dog, you're not going through here. You can't go in the kitchen. She's like, that's weird. Like, I need to go in there and get my stuff. But he would not let her go past. And she looked past him, and she could see that, like, the trash can was out of place for one, and that there was a gas can in the kitchen. She's like, that's weird. It is believed that at this point, Channon wasn't in the trash can yet. Maybe they were setting up for what they were going to do. It is believed that Channon was actually being held in the bathroom with Vanessa, because the guys told her that Vanessa was in the bathroom and that's why she couldn't go in. So since Daphne wasn't able to get the items she had went there to get, like her makeup bags and things like that, she was like, okay, you know what, then I'm just gonna dip because this is a fruitless venture that I have gone on. Thanks for wasting my time. And she goes to leave. And she said that LaMarcus gave her like a plastic bag that was full of clothes that she thought were hers at the time and like some other stuff. I can't remember what the other thing was. Oh, it was a ring. Clothing and a ring. And gave it to her. And he's like, here you go. This is great. Have a good day. Goodbye. So she leaves. She goes back to wherever she was. And she notices once she opens the bag that these clothes are not hers. And they're not even in her size. It turns out that they actually were Shannon's clothes. And the ring had belonged to Channon as well. So she's like, this is weird. And she ends up calling LaMarcus. And it's like, what the fuck? These aren't mine. Like, she probably is thinking like he's got another woman, right? I can't imagine she's thinking, whatever. Too much. My brain. Too much. So she's like, what is this? This isn't mine. So he comes to her friend's house where she is, and he actually picks up all the clothes except for, I think, one pair of pants that Daphne gave to a friend of hers. So she's like, they're not mine. They'll fit you. Take them. Now, all of this stuff with the clothes and the visit and all that, that's all happening on the day that Chris is found, but it hasn't been, like, reported yet. So the timeline gets a little fuzzy for me here, but from what I understand, LaMarcus leaves Daphne's friend's house and he ends up coming back later to hang out. So he's hanging out, they're there, they're doing the thing, the TV's on. And a news story broadcasts on the TV saying that a body had been found near their apartment. And she's already feeling a little bit weird about it because she had been in the apartment. There was some weird stuff going on over there, you know? She's like, this is a little bit odd. I don't know how I feel about this. But, you know, they continue on hanging out as they do. And while they're all together, Daphne gets a phone call from her mother. And her mother says something to her that makes her even more suspicious of LaMarcus. But I'm not sure what it was, but it hardly matters. What does happen next is that Daphne ends up looking through his jacket pocket and finds a gun as a result of this phone call with her mother. And she's like, okay, you gotta go. But by this time, LaMarcus no longer had a car because he had already ditched Shannon's car. So she's like, fine. I will drive you where you want to go. You just need to get out of here. Where do you want to go? So he has her take him to his friend's house, Eric Boyd. Now, if you remember, Eric Boyd is one of the people I talked about in the beginning who is responsible for Channon and Chris's abductions and murders. So Daphne, just so that we can cover our bases here, Daphne saw him during the time that this was going on, that he was a wanted man. Let him spend the night with her. Like, they spent the night together. She was in the house when some stuff was going down. She had some of Shannon's stuff that she then gave back. Like, there was something going on there. Did she know? I don't know. They didn't seem to think so. The cops didn't seem to think so. She did take LaMarcus to Eric's after feeling suspicious of him after a body was found, which could be weird. But either way, nothing ended up happening to her in terms of, like, anything legal. Is anything she did illegal? I don't know. I guess it depends on what she knew, but it could perhaps be considered immoral. I don't really know, but the fact is nothing did happen to her, and this ended up not being super helpful when it came to a race issue that's going to come up later. It definitely fueled the fire for some people, and because Daphne was white, and Eric Boyd's attorney later said, like, what? She was involved, she knew this, she did this, but she's not in trouble because she's white, so that's something that does come up later. So anyways, police hear all this and they're like, so LaMarcus is still in town and he's with some guy named Eric Boyd. That's very interesting because at this point, there's a manhunt for LaMarcus. Not just LaMarcus, but LaTalvis actually as well. For whatever reason, the first two people who were released to the media as like suspects and people that they're looking into were LaMarcus and LaTalvis. It could have something to do with what Daphne said, but I couldn't find out exactly why they were the first two that were the people that they were most interested in. I mean, LaMarcus makes sense. LaTalvis, I don't know why he'd be more interesting than George or Vanessa. But anyway. Both men did have criminal records. LaMarcus had just been released in August from a Tennessee prison after serving 5 years for what? Carjacking and aggravated robbery. And LaTalvis had been convicted in 2003 in New York State of a third-degree attempted robbery. And with that, police now want to find LaMarcus. They want to find LaTalvis. And now they also want to find Eric Boyd. Now, at this point, a few things are happening at the same time, so I'm going to try to make it make sense by telling you one thing at a time. So first, let's start with Eric Boyd and LaMarcus, what they're doing. So they're together, and they realize that they should probably get out of Dodge. Like, they know that LaMarcus is being searched for by the police, and they should go somewhere where maybe they won't be discovered. So they actually go to a friend's house, and this friend is having a birthday party. So they go, they do the whole party thing, and then they're like, hey, do you mind if we just stay here for a couple of days? And this friend's like, yeah, sure, that's cool. So they're hanging out, being real casual, when whose dumb, stupid face pops up on the TV screen but LaMarcus's. So the girl whose birthday party it was, whose house it was, is like, you gotta go. Well, actually, first she's like, well, what is this all about? Like, what's going on? He's like, oh, I have no idea. I literally, none the wiser. I don't know if that's right. I have no idea what's going on. And she's like, I don't believe you, so I'm gonna need you to go. You can wait till sundown, but then I need you to get out of my house. So sundown comes and they don't immediately leave. So she's like, get out of my house. So they leave. And I guess this girl was more friends with Eric than LaMarcus anyway, so throwing him out was not like hard for her. So at this point, Eric and LaMarcus literally have nowhere to go. So they're quite literally, how many times am I going to say literally? Literally a couple more times. Anyway, they are literally hiding behind an apartment complex, just like laying in a ditch. That's not an exaggeration. They were laying in a ditch. And at this point, Eric's like, okay, I'm going to go talk to one of my friends and see if I can get you a ride out of town. He goes, he asks his friend, and she's like, get fucked, and tells him no. So he goes back, lays down in the little ditch next to LaMarcus, and is like, no luck, my guy. Nobody wants to help you because you're a disgusting murderer. So they're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. Let's break into this vacant house. There's like a house with a for sale, for rent, for sale sign out front. It's vacant. They break in and they start hanging out there. Because at this point, they're literally just like running around on foot. Like Daphne dropped him off at Eric's house, but after that, like they don't have a car. LaMarcus had ditched Shannon's car, and Eric did have a car at one point. Incidentally, it was the car that was used in the carjacking. You remember how the guys like pushed Channon and Chris in the car and then they drove off and there was a car trailing behind them? This was LaTalvis driving Eric Boyd's cousin's car that Eric had borrowed from his cousin. And then when Eric actually gave it back to his cousin, just for like a fun fact, he dropped his cousin's car off at her house, and there was like a weird bag of bullets. She found a bag containing bullets in her car and was like, I don't know what this is, and threw it out. So now they're hanging out in this abandoned house and they realize like they're hungry. Like they haven't eaten in a bit. So Eric's like, okay, I'm going to go out and I'm going to get us food, because obviously LaMarcus can't be just walking out showing everybody his face. He's being searched for. And at this point, Eric doesn't know that he's also being searched for. So he goes out, and him and LaMarcus know that they're going to be able to talk because they've actually come up with a system for like phone calls during this time where basically Eric, because I don't think he had his own phone, if I remember correctly. So basically Eric would call him twice real quick back to back from whatever phone he was able to get. LaMarcus would see that it was Eric because it was 2 calls back to back, and he would call back whatever number that Eric had called him from. And they've been doing that a lot. So that's cool. That's great. So Eric leaves. He goes about doing his thing, walking around, getting the food, living his life, when he is stopped by police and they question him. And at first he's like, LaMarcus? Don't know him. But then they're like, listen, yes you do. We've already spoken to Daphne. She already told us she dropped him off at your house, and we've already looked at the phone records, and we know that you guys had been talking quite a bit. So you know what? Maybe he did have his own phone. I guess he did, because they did look at cell records to be able to find him. So we're like, we know that you know him. So what's up? I think at this point, Eric knew that the fat lady was a-singing. So he's like, you know what? I'm also going to be a-singing, and I'm going to lead you right now to where he is. So he takes him to this vacant house with the for sale sign out front. They bust in and they find LaMarcus there, surrounded by like trash. There's like old food wrappers, McDonald's wrappers, fucking, you know, trash. It's an abandoned ass house. They've been in there a little bit, and they also find a pistol on him. And that already doesn't look good, right? You've got a gun, you're hiding out in this abandoned house. Well, on his possession, in his possession, on his person, he also had Chris Newsom's shoes. The shoes he was wearing the night that they killed him, he had them with him in this house. And honestly, he was clearly like hardcore paranoid, because he also had like a pair of binoculars. So I could just picture him all scared of getting caught, like looking out with his little binoculars for anybody who's coming to get him, but he didn't see all the cops raiding him at that point in time. So I'm glad, but like, I just got that visual, so I wanted you guys to have that visual, I guess. Now, while all this is happening, LaMarcus is being manhunted, found, raided, arrested. That's happening over here. And at the same time, police are processing the house, looking at everything, looking at the evidence, looking at the fingerprints, going through the house to see if they can find anything that'll lead them to LaTalvis or to anybody else. So while they're searching that house, they find like a DVD. And this DVD had been rented from a library in Kentucky, and it was overdue. So they searched the database to see who had rented this DVD, because that's in Kentucky, they're in Tennessee. They look it up, bing, bang, boom, George Thomas, which was the man who was staying at the house and was LaTalvis's friend. Police end up getting lucky with this because they actually get a tip. Somebody calls the police and tells them that Latalvis was in Kentucky, which now that lines up with the DVD, so they're really, you know, cooking with some gas, right? And this friend says that Latalvis had admitted to him what his brother had done. So he was telling his friend what LaMarcus had done, but not telling him what he had done. He had minimized his involvement. But still, this friend heard everything and was like, that's cool, that's cool. Oh, that's fucked up, that's crazy, wow. And then was like, hello, police, this is what's going on. So police were actually able to find out where Latalvis and George were because they were able to trace the call that Latalvis had made to this friend when he had made his confession. Did that make sense? I think it did. Cool. I told you there was a lot of information in this case. That's why it was like so much to look into. So now that it's known where these people are, federal, state, and local law enforcement all get in a helicopter together so that they can fly to Kentucky. So they get to the house, and it turns out where they were staying was at another friend's house who seemingly had no fucking idea what was going on. They were just like, oh, my friends are back from Knoxville, let's hang out. Like, sure, you can stay here. So they're staying there, and police are like, okay. And they call the person who lives there. And they're like, ring, 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 ring. Hello? You might want to get the fuck out. So she's like, cool, bye. And she dips. She's like, I gotta go. And she leaves. And then police swarm in to arrest Latalvis and George. Inside this home, they found more items that belonged to Channon inside the room that Latalvis was staying in. And they also found that someone in the home had been on the computer searching up Knoxville news. So they clearly wanted to see what was going on and how close they were to getting caught. Okay, so at this point, they have LaMarcus, Latalvis, George, and Eric all in custody, and it seems like they've got everyone until another arrest is made. And this arrest was also made in Kentucky, because it appears that it wasn't just Latalvis and George who ran off to Kentucky. It was Latalvis, George, and Latalvis' girlfriend, Vanessa. So in that room where Shannon's stuff was found, this was a room that Latalvis shared with Vanessa, and the things that were found in the room, which we're going to get into a little bit later, would show that it was probably Vanessa who had those things. Now, initially, Vanessa wasn't being treated as a suspect. She was actually being treated as a witness and was put into protective custody so that she'd, be safe from these men. But as she talked, and she liked to talk, she talked, and she talked, and she talked. She gave more and more information to police that let them know that she was more involved than they had initially thought. Vanessa admitted that she was in the home at the time that the assaults and murder took place, but she said that she wasn't involved. She did admit, however, that she did know that it was LaMarcus, Latalvis, and George who burned Chris's body. She also told police that she didn't see what happened, but that she did see the men repeatedly go in and out of the bedroom where Channon was held, tied up, and blindfolded. She also told police that she did see Channon have cleaner put into her mouth, and that she did see the men put their clothing that was stained in blood and smelled like gasoline into the washer. She said that she had no idea what was happening to Channon, that she never saw the torture and she never heard any screams. And she said she had never even been in that bedroom until after LaMarcus had choked Channon and she was like unconscious. And she says at that point, LaMarcus called Vanessa into the room and told her to check Shannon's pulse because he couldn't tell if she was dead or alive. She says that after that, she saw the men hog-tie Channon, put her in the trash bags, and put her in the trash can. So Vanessa did end up being arrested because it was clear to police that she knew what was going on. She had a very clear understanding of what was happening in that house, but yet did nothing to help. And she even admitted to police herself that she was alone with Channon, that she was left alone, just the two of them, and that she didn't try to help. She didn't try to let her go. Instead, she stood watch. Now, with all the suspects in jail, they immediately all turn on each other and start implicating each other in the crimes, but distancing themselves. They each gave differing accounts of what happened, but of course there was some overlap. One thing that was consistent in all of their accounts was that all of them, except for Eric Boyd, admitted to being inside the home when this all took place. Eric never admitted to that. He never admitted to being in the home. He said that he wasn't involved at all. He's like, I just helped him after the fact. I don't know what you're talking about. I wasn't there. I didn't take part in the carjacking. Nothing like that. But he did seem to have inside knowledge. He knew things, very specific things about the entire ordeal that seemed to police like he had firsthand knowledge, not like somebody told him about it, even though he had said that he knew all this because LaMarcus told him. It seemed like he knew all of it because he was there. Another thing that seemed consistent across the stories is that LaMarcus was the ringleader, though he did deny this completely. He actually, so when he was arrested and questioned, he waived his Miranda rights and he was like, I will talk to you. But then he went on to give over 5 different versions of what happened that night. Oh, not that night, over that weekend. In his first version of what happened, he said he wasn't there at all. He said he left Friday and had no idea what had happened and he had never been there. But police presented some evidence to him and he's like, okay, fine. I was there. I saw my brother pull up in the SUV, which was Shannon's car, but I never saw Channon. I never saw Chris. He's like, I used the car because I deliver drugs. I have a drug dealer. That's what I do. That's my trade. And we had the car, so I was like, might as well use it. So I drove around. I delivered drugs. Cool. I dumped the car after because I knew it was stolen. And then when I found out a body had been found near the house, I was like, oh shit, my brother definitely did that. So I went and I wiped down the car. So that's why the car was wiped out, but why you might have found one of my fingerprints in there. In his next version, he said he had been asleep for hours and hours and must have missed everything, and then went out and hung out with Daphne and said that he didn't even know who Chris and Channon were, but that his brother did mention to him that George may have killed someone named Chris. Then he said that Latalvis and George had abducted them to rob them. Then he said he saw them tied up in the backseat and that he didn't want to be part of it, so he left. And he said in this version that when he came back about 20 minutes later after smoking some weed, that Channon was in the house, but Chris never came in. And at that point, he had actually spoken to Channon, this person that he never knew just a version ago, and she told him that she didn't want to die. In yet another version, he said that he was at home when Latalvis and George showed up at his house with Channon and Chris in the vehicle. He said that at some point after that, George and Latalvis left with Channon and Chris and then came back with only Channon. And that she was brought in the house and she had a hoodie on, but she wasn't tied up or bound or anything like that. But since she had seen him, he got nervous. So he left in her car to go sell some drugs. He said when he was done, he went and he took the car and he parked it down the street and then he wiped it clean of prints, just in case. In case of what? I don't know. That's just what one does. And then he went back to the house. He said in this version that he just sat in the living room and he didn't go past that and he didn't see Channon. But then he's like, okay, fine. I did see Channon. She was sitting on a bed in the room and she told me that she didn't want to die. But he said that he never raped her. He doesn't know if anybody in the house had sex with her at all and that her DNA or his DNA would not be found on her body. But the lie detector determined that was a fucking lie. All of that was a lie. Everything he said was a lie. Well, I don't know if everything he said was a lie. It sounds like he probably drove around in her car and delivered drugs and shit. But most of what he said was a lie. So, 2 kids are dead, and 5 people have been arrested for the abductions and murders, and all 5 are denying responsibility. They would go on, all 5, to be tried in separate trials, 2 of which would end up getting retrials when the drug scandal broke out with the presiding judge. But, that's a whole nother story. And then one of them would almost get away with murder, but it would catch up to him 10 years later. There was talk of consent. There was victim blaming and bashing. There was talk of a race war and protests by the KKK. There were 2 new laws passed, and there were people fainting in court. But most importantly, there was justice. But these are all things that we're going to talk about next week in part 2. Next week, we're going to talk about all that, the conclusion, everything that I've just discussed. We're going to touch on all of that. It's a lot. This is only going to be a 2-parter, but that will come out on Monday. Now that you've heard what you've heard so far, I want your gut instinct, and that's revisiting the question of the day, and that was this. What do you think was the real motive for Channon and Chris's murders? What went so wrong here that led to something this horrible happening? Let me know all your thoughts so far down in the comments below. Now, with that said, that completes this video. I hope you found it interesting and informative, and it gave you all the information you would want so far when looking into this case. And of course, I want to thank you for remembering Channon and Chris with me today. If you haven't already, please don't forget to join the Brat Pack by subscribing and ringing the bell. I put out a new video every single week, and I would love to hang out with you. Yes, you specifically, you. And if you want to hang out more consistently, all my social media is listed down below, along with a link to my merch store and a link to join my membership, where you get early access to non-sponsored videos, polls, occasional live streams, things like that. Before you leave, don't forget to suggest whatever case you would like to see me cover down below. As this case indicates, I like to look into the cases you suggest because I know you're filled with good ideas and good taste, otherwise you wouldn't be here. And I like looking into the cases you suggest because oftentimes they're cases that need more coverage or cases that I haven't heard of. I especially love covering hometown cases, so if you have any cases close to your home or close to your heart, leave it in the comments below. And now, with all of that said, I just want to thank you for being here when you could literally be anywhere else in the world. That is tight. You are tight. Please stay safe and be a better person than you were yesterday, and I hope to see you in next week's video for part 2.